should have just stayed in Caesarea that wretched day. Why didn't I just stay in Caesarea? You see, I had been the prefect of the Roman province of Judea, an area that was also known as Palestine or Israel. As the representative of Emperor Tiberius, I was Rome, the eternal city. I had total power and control over the entire province, even the power of life or death. I took a large group of soldiers and made the 70-mile uphill dusty trip to Jerusalem and prepared to stay there for a few weeks. I had most of the soldiers stay in the Antonia fortress, our military garrison on the northwest corner of the Temple Mount. Now, imagine me in a deep sleep after having a little too much to drink the night before. My attendant taps at my door and I answer. He motions for me to step away so as to not wake up my wife and tells me that a group of Jewish leaders are waiting frantically to talk to me. He says things that seem odd, but he wants to make sure we don't unintentionally set off a riot by ignoring them. The leader of the assembled religious brass points to a wounded man and says, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes the payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." At that point, I didn't care a bit about what they had to say. The man they were pointing to was badly beaten and clearly posed no threat to me or the empire. The charges were not even worthy of my time, so I sarcastically asked the poor man, "Are you the king of the Jews?" I knew Herod was the king of the Jews. "You have said so," the man replied. Not a bad answer if I don't say so myself. I just laughed. I announced to the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." I turned to leave, and the group leader frantically tried another charge. "He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and he has come all the way here." Now, the leader thought he could get my attention by insinuating that this poor wretch might be causing an insurrection, but he got my attention in another way. He mentioned that this man was from Galilee, which meant that he was under the authority of Herod. Conveniently, Herod was only a few hundred yards away. Herod would have to deal with a problem that had no good solution. He was either going to break Roman laws or disappoint the Jewish leaders and possibly cause a riot. Either way, I wanted to make sure Herod's life was miserable. He was a pathetic, sad little man, and we were bitter enemies. It was an easy choice for me. I sent the crowd with their wretched prisoner to Herod and headed back to sleep. Now, imagine my surprise a few hours later when the crowd reappeared and demanded to see me again. What had happened? I asked my assistant and he gave me the short version. Herod was actually happy to see the man because he had heard of him and wanted to see him do some great miracle. When the man just stood there, Herod eventually tired of his silence and had his soldiers ridicule him, beat him to a pulp, and dress him in a purple robe that signified his supposed royalty. Then, in a sign of deference to me, Herod sent him back for my judgment. As that poor man stood there, weaving from fatigue and pain, I could easily see this was not a legal case, but some kind of religious dispute. I was in a no-win situation, and I frantically searched for a way out. My first gambit, to tell the crowd that Herod and I both found no guilt in the man, and that I would punish him before releasing him. Rather than appeasing the crowd, this just made them more furious. The religious leaders were whipping the crowd into a frenzy. A riot was sure to break out soon. My second tactical gambit, a brilliant maneuver, give the crowd a choice of releasing this man or releasing a murderer, a revolutionary named Barabbas. It was my custom to release someone at Passover, and I was sure of whom the crowd would choose. But Much to my surprise, they demanded the release of Barabbas and would not listen to my reasoning. "Crucify him, crucify him," they shouted. They had me in a corner and they knew it, both the religious leaders and the crowd. I appealed again to them, but on the verge of a riot, and they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." Their shouts prevailed. I released Barabbas and gave the prisoner to the crowd, which was tacit approval for him to be crucified. Hours later, my centurion brought his report. The innocent man's name was Jesus. He was so fatigued that he could not carry his cross all the way to the hill of death, so my centurion seized someone from the crowd and had him carry it for him. My centurion was surprised at the large number of people who supported Jesus and followed them, but they were mostly women or men who posed no obvious problem. With typical Roman efficiency, my soldiers took along 2 other men who were scheduled to be executed, and all 3 of them were crucified on Golgotha, with Jesus being placed in the middle. As was often done, the soldiers gambled against one another to claim the clothing that would never be needed again by the prisoners. I had a notice placed above Jesus that said, "This is the King of the Jews." The soldiers and crowd delighted in mocking Jesus about his inability to save himself, even though he was a king. The only one in the crowd who treated him with respect? One of the other crucified prisoners. It was about noon when a deep darkness came over the entire land, lasting about 3 hours. The Jews, ever superstitious, were reminded of the plague of darkness when they were slaves in Egypt. They started to regret their actions. The enormous temple curtain was torn in 2 from top to bottom, and the Jews went ballistic. Jesus called out, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He died. It had taken only a few hours for him to die, and it often took several days. My centurion was amazed and deeply moved. He said that he praised the Jews' God and said, "Surely this man was a righteous one." No sooner had the centurion finished his report than my assistant came with another urgent request. A wealthy Jew named Joseph had come to ask for the body of Jesus so he could bury it. He was in a hurry. He said he wanted to wrap the body in linen and place it in a new tomb before the Sabbath started. Quite honestly, I was thrilled to have this unexpected request. Usually, we Romans would leave crucified bodies in place for a long time. It's a powerful reminder. However, since this Jesus had so many followers, I did not want the body there as motivation for them to unite and rebel, or make a sacred martyr of him. Having the body disappear was a good solution to a potential problem. I granted Joseph permission, and that was the end of the matter. At least it was the end, as far as I expected.